What do you get when Hollywood royalty crosses paths with no-holds-barred daytime movers and shakers? One of the most jaw-dropping, nothing-held-back TV moments of the year, Meghan Markle storming off the View set in the middle of a live taping. And trust me, you'll want to stick around for the full breakdown, because this fallout goes far beyond spilling coffee. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and drop your hot take in the comments. Was Meghan justified in walking, or was this meltdown? Let's unpack the full story. The morning sunlight filters through the View's skyscraper studio as Meghan Markle takes her seat. It's her first U.S. TV appearance since controversy swept her name, and the anticipation is electric. Political TV is usually civil, but today is different. Sunny Hostin and Joy Behar begin with pleasantries, child updates, charitable work, but then Whoopi turns her gaze toward Meghan in that trademark no-nonsense tone. "You've been speaking out a lot lately," she starts. "But do you ever feel like you're being selective about what you speak out against?" The terms selective and speaking out hang in the air. The lights click louder. The audience snaps to attention. Meghan clears her throat, voice calm. "I've always spoken out mainly for those who don't have a platform." Hostin nods. This is familiar territory. But the tone shifts further as Whoopi leans forward. "That's great. But some say you only speak when it helps your brand, not necessarily when it helps the cause." The audience noise softens. This is getting real. And that's when it happens. Meghan's practiced poise cracks. She leans back, firm. "I don't use cause as a brand. I use a brand to serve causes." The calm is electric. Whoopi nudges again. That's a slick phrase. But it rings hollow when so much of your activism is tied to high-profile deals. You can almost hear the tape recorder stop. The polite energy evaporates. Meghan's jaw sets. What am I supposed to do? Stay silent. Watch injustices happen. The tension tightens. Sunny and Joy glance at each other, unsure if they should intervene. The studio audience shifts. It's still live. The host is belittling the guest until Meghan does something no one saw coming. She stands. "I'm sorry this isn't productive." Hands on hips, shoulders squared. Without warning, she walks off camera. Just like that, Meghan Markle exits the View. No handshake, no farewell. The camera stays on her empty chair, then quickly cuts to the hosts and an awkward silence. That scene, it became instant internet history. Clips exploded across TikTok, X, YouTube, and better yet, reaction compile videos started popping up before her heels even hit the lobby. Meghan Markle was trending within the hour. Mainstream media caught fire just as fast. Fox News lambasted Meghan as performative and diva behavior, saying she couldn't handle less than sanitized questions. CNN pundits were more divided. Some praised her boundary setting, others criticized the abrupt exit as petulant. The New York Times hedged. One woman's silence became a signal that couldn't be ignored. And on The View itself, replayed clips in their next segment sparked chaos. Whoopi defended the encounter, saying, "We asked what we had to ask." Joy admitted it got tense, but maybe that's how dialogue grows. Now, is Meghan a diva? Maybe. Is this deeper? Definitely. The View wasn't a royal press tour. It was a triage moment when influence meets accountability. She came to share her story but was unprepared for being challenged, not just on charisma, but on consistency and ownership. Behind the cameras, insiders say it got even messier. Staffers tell us Meghan's team had prepped her for soft questions, charitable updates, and motherhood anecdotes, but not pointed inquiries about her brand partnerships or selective advocacy. When who pushed those buttons? She walked away. Even Oprah weighed in on social media. Silence is also a voice. You choose when to use it. That quote immediately turned into graphics, prints, and protest posters. Commentary shows started debating not just what Meghan said, but how she left. Some called it courage, she didn't take the bait. Others called it cowardice. If you can't take pressure, stay off live television. And still, the deeper story simmered. In a world where every word is public content, walking away is the story. This wasn't a Fuji meltdown, it was a moment of defiance. A declaration, her voice won't be mined for headlines, but will the public stay interested or feel cheated? Because the one thing the clip didn't show. What happened next? Did Meghan sit down in the green room and decompress? Was she proud or humiliated? Was this a one-off event or the beginning of a new narrative strategy? The cameras had barely cut to commercial before the View studio burst into organized chaos. Producers, handlers, and security scrambled backstage as Meghan Markle disappeared behind the curtain. What the audience saw was dramatic enough, but what happened behind the scenes turned this moment into the stuff of daytime TV legend. As soon as Meghan left the stage, eyewitnesses say she didn't storm out in tears or rage. No, she walked with a kind of pointed calm, the calculated composure of someone who knew exactly the message her exit would send. She wasn't flustered. She was furious, but collected. An insider said she looked more disappointed than angry. It wasn't a meltdown. It was a statement. Within minutes, her team was in crisis mode. Texts were flying. Her head PR rep, a former Silicon Valley comms specialist, immediately began drafting statements. Not denials, not explanations, narratives. Meghan stands for respectful, meaningful dialogue. When it turns into something else, she removes herself. Simple, strategic, powerful. Meanwhile, inside the View's production office, the fallout began. Whoopi, according to behind-the-scenes chatter, was unapologetic. "We're not here to hand out candy," she reportedly told one staffer. "If people can't handle a real conversation, that's not our problem." But producers were sweating. They knew this would go viral, but would it damage the show's reputation? Would Meghan's fan base retaliate? The morning after, the internet was on fire. Memes, think pieces, and dueling hashtags exploded across platforms. Stand With Meghan trended on X and TikTok, showing clips of her dignified exit alongside quotes about resilience and boundary setting. At the same time, Walk Off Windsor gained traction among critics who saw the move as classic royal entitlement disguised as activism. Reaction videos from other talk show hosts didn't help. Jimmy Kimmel called the incident the royal flush of daytime TV. Trevor Noah, in contrast, offered a more nuanced take. Meghan Markle's walkout wasn't weakness. It was a strategic PR move. It said, "I don't owe you my pain," especially when it's turned into entertainment. That line went viral too. And then came the real blowback. Conservative commentators seized on the moment as proof of Meghan's supposed fragile ego. Fox and Friends ran a segment titled "Markle Meltdown. Can She Handle America's Heat?" Candace Owens said, "This is why we fought a revolution. We don't bow to royalty, especially when they demand praise for quitting." But it wasn't just the right. Even some progressive circles raised eyebrows. Political strategist Ana Navarro, a frequent View guest, tweeted, "If you come on live TV, you don't get to walk out when it gets uncomfortable. That's not strength. That's privilege." Yet others disagreed entirely. Social justice advocates noted that Meghan was being held to impossible standards. Speak up, but not too much. Be authentic, but stay likable. Own your truth, but only if it aligns with public comfort. Meghan is damned if she does, and damned if she doesn't, one op-ed read. Walking away was her power move. Not a retreat, a refusal. And let's be clear, the power of walking away is not new. For generations, women, especially women of color, have been expected to absorb disrespect with grace, to stay and explain themselves. Meghan didn't. She chose silence over spectacle, and in doing so, she created a bigger spectacle than any argument could. But here's where it gets even more layered. By the end of that week, Meghan's PR team had successfully flipped the script. Major outlets began running pieces, not about the walkout, but about the importance of controlling one's narrative in hostile media spaces. A Vogue online editorial praised Meghan's intentional withdrawal from performative conversation. Time published a feature titled The Cost of Composure: Why Meghan Walked. In response, a BC released an official statement that was neutral but firm. Guests are always welcome to express themselves on The View. We believe in robust, respectful dialogue. Meghan Markle's appearance was no exception. Translation: we're not apologizing, but we're not pushing her under the bus either. Then came the Whisper campaign. Other celebrities and public figures began quietly weighing in, off the record. One major actor allegedly said, "That's why I don't do daytime anymore. They want blood, not conversation." A political analyst claimed that Meghan's treatment on the show exposed how toxic daytime TV could be for high-profile women trying to walk a fine line between celebrity and credibility. So, what does this tell us? That what happened on The View wasn't just about one interview gone sideways. It was a collision of two forces: the modern media machine that feeds on controversy and a woman who knows how to turn friction into fuel. Meghan Markle may have walked off, but she didn't walk away from the spotlight. In fact, she's now more central to the cultural conversation than ever. Behind the scenes, there are rumors swirling that Meghan is considering launching her own media platform, one that bypasses traditional networks altogether. Imagine it, a place where she controls the questions, the framing, the story. No interruptions, no confrontations, just message. If true, her exit from The View wasn't a breakdown. It was a launch pad. Once the initial media shockwaves had rippled across social media and TV segments, a curious silence fell. Not from the public, who continued to dissect every frame of the broadcast with forensic obsession, but from Meghan Markle herself. No tweet, no statement, no exclusive follow-up interview. And for Meghan, who has long understood the power of timing and narrative control, this was no accident. Behind the scenes, however, the machine was already moving. Meghan's top aides were reportedly in overdrive fielding requests from every corner of the media universe. Podcasts, morning shows, magazines, even international broadcasters were desperate for the first exclusive post-View sit-down. But every one of them received a polite, resounding no. Why? Because this wasn't going to be a reactive moment. Meghan wasn't going to explain herself in someone else's arena on someone else's terms. If there was going to be a response, it would be curated, meaningful, and unmistakably hers. Sources close to Meghan say she spent the days following her walk-off meeting with two types of people: crisis PR experts and cultural strategists. Not damage control in the traditional sense, but brand architects. People who understand that in 2025, the line between scandal and opportunity is razor thin, and the ones who benefit most are those who shape the narrative first. And that's exactly what she did. Roughly 1 week later, Meghan re-emerged, not in a primetime sit-down or tearful confessional, but in a 10-minute pre-recorded video posted to her personal Foundation's platform. The setting was deliberate: her home, softly lit, with subtle nods to her humanitarian branding in the background, books on race, photos of family, a cup of tea beside her. Calm, grounded, and completely in control. She didn't name names. She didn't lash out. What she did was tell a story. Sometimes choosing not to stay in the room is the most powerful form of engagement, she began. Her tone was warm, yet unwavering. When the space no longer invites dialogue but demands spectacle, we all have the right to walk away. It was a masterclass in reframing. No mention of Whoopi, no replay of the segment, just a deliberate shift of focus from confrontation to principle. And while critics rolled their eyes, saying she dodged accountability, her supporters hailed it as classic Meghan: strong, poised, unapologetic. But even more fascinating than Meghan's public strategy was the growing tension behind the scenes at The View itself. Reports started leaking from within a BC's daytime division. This wasn't the first guest who had walked off or nearly walked off because of the show's increasingly combative tone. One longtime staffer told a media outlet anonymously, "We've always pushed boundaries, but lately, it feels like we're crossing lines for views." And Meghan's incident was the flashpoint. Executives held closed-door meetings to review not just her appearance but the show's format. Some insiders argued that Meghan had overreacted. Others worried that the show was slipping into tabloid territory. One source claimed that even Sunny Hostin, usually a voice of reason, was privately deeply uncomfortable with how the interview unfolded. And then came the unexpected twist. An internal ABC memo surfaced. It wasn't public, but it was damning. In it, senior producers reportedly reminded the hosts to consider the tone of discourse with high-profile guests and ensure the studio remains a place of conversation, not confrontation. It didn't name Meghan, but everyone knew exactly who it was about. Suddenly, the network seemed to be walking a tightrope. On one side, preserving The View's legacy as a place of fearless dialogue. On the other, grappling with the fallout of alienating high-profile guests who expect a degree of respect even in disagreement. Meanwhile, Meghan was quietly winning. The video she posted, it went viral. Not just viral in the clickbait sense, but resonant. It sparked an online movement, particularly among women of color, who began sharing their own stories under hashtags like WalkAwayPower and MissSpaceMyChoice. Meghan hadn't just exited a TV segment, she had tapped into something deeper. A feeling of being constantly interrogated, challenged, or expected to explain oneself in spaces that were never built for them. And in doing so, she flipped the public narrative. Commentators who had previously been lukewarm on her began reconsidering. Even Piers Morgan, perhaps her most infamous media antagonist, tweeted a backhanded compliment. Well, she certainly knows how to turn a tantrum into a TED Talk. Meghan's defenders, of course, weren't having it. But the point was clear, the media had taken notice. Again. And then came the bombshell. Less than 2 weeks after the incident, multiple industry insiders revealed that Meghan had inked a deal with a major streaming platform, not for a documentary, not for a memoir sequel, but for a live interview series. Think Oprah, but global. Diverse guests, intimate settings, controlled narratives, and most importantly, Meghan asking the questions. The title, Unspoken. The tagline, What the world hears when we stop being interrupted. It was the perfect counterpunch. Not only was she refusing to play the media game, she was rewriting it. Unspoken promised a space where depth replaced drama, where guests wouldn't be blindsided, and where truth wasn't a commodity, it was the goal. And guess who her first rumored guest was? Oprah Winfrey. Full circle. That announcement alone broke the internet. Critics scrambled to shift their positions. A BC found itself in a PR bind. The View, once considered a coveted media stop for public figures, now had a reputation to repair. And Meghan? She'd just pulled off one of the greatest pivots in recent media history. But here's the most telling part. This entire chain of events, from walk-off to viral speech to media empire, wasn't some random accident. It was meticulously executed. Meghan knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that leaving that stage wouldn't be the end of the story, it would be the beginning of her own. Because Meghan Markle doesn't run from a moment. She redefines it. The dust may have settled for the public, but inside the walls of a B, see the fallout from Meghan Markle's sudden departure from The View was still very much alive. What began as a fiery headline-grabbing clash had evolved into a full-blown internal crisis. Not because a celebrity got offended on air, but because Meghan Markle had done what few public figures dared, walk out in front of a live audience and seize control of the narrative on her own terms. As word of her streaming deal, Unspoken, began dominating entertainment headlines, The View's producers were facing a reckoning of their own. Ratings, long a point of pride for the network, had seen an immediate spike following the Meghan episode. But the bump was short-lived. Within 10 days, viewership began to dip dramatically. At first, XX chalked it up to timing. Maybe it was just a typical rating cycle. Maybe the viral buzz had pulled in new viewers who didn't stick. But as the trend continued, it became clear this was more than a fluke. Exit surveys and social media analysis painted a sobering picture. Audiences were growing tired of the show's tone. What once felt sharp and bold now came across as combative and needlessly aggressive. The Meghan Markle incident had become a mirror, and what the audience saw staring back was a brand in crisis. Inside the studio, tensions were just as high. According to sources close to production, the atmosphere on set was tense and unusually formal in the days following Meghan's walk-off. The hosts who normally riffed and joked between takes were noticeably reserved. Whoopi Goldberg, in particular, reportedly withdrew behind the scenes, offering only the bare minimum of interaction with staff and fellow panelists. It wasn't that the women weren't used to controversy. They thrived on it. But this was different. Because this time, the pushback wasn't from angry Twitter mobs or cable news commentators. It was coming from within their own fan base. A week after the episode aired, an open letter signed by over 10,000 viewers circulated online, addressed directly to ABC's executives. It wasn't just criticism, it was concern. The letter acknowledged The View's legacy of bold female discourse, but warned that the show had drifted dangerously toward spectacle over substance. Meghan Markle didn't walk out because she couldn't handle a tough question. One portion read, "She walked out because she was being baited into a moment instead of invited into a conversation." ABC had to respond, and they did quietly, subtly, but unmistakably. For the next several weeks, the show's guest lineup shifted. Fewer polarizing figures. More authors, professors, and public servants. The mood of the show turned softer, less confrontational. The intro music was updated. The promotional graphics changed. And the show's social media presence, once filled with spicy sound bites and tense screenshots, pivoted toward highlighting moments of female unity and shared perspectives. And Meghan? She was thriving. Just days after Unspoken was announced, pre-subscription numbers reportedly shattered platform records. Interviews were already being taped in secret, no trailers, no previews. Just a sleek, stylized promo with Meghan walking through an empty theater, voiceover saying, "Some truths don't need permission." And yet, behind Meghan's poised exterior, insiders say she was absolutely aware of how high the stakes were. She wasn't just producing a show. She was challenging an entire format, one that for decades had relied on interruption, tension, and ideological clash to drive ratings. The View, real-time, cable punditry, this wasn't just about one interview. It was about flipping the entire model of televised conversation. And it was working. Other celebrities who had been burned by mainstream media, especially women of color, began signaling interest in Unspoken. Musicians, athletes, politicians, even former royals. Meghan had quietly become the center of a new media movement, where dialogue was intentional, boundaries were respected, and viral didn't mean vicious. But perhaps the most telling moment came during an unrelated panel on daytime ethics at the Television Critics Association. A media scholar was asked, what was the turning point for how celebrities engage with daytime shows? Their answer? When Meghan Markle left The View mid-show. That wasn't an exit. That was a declaration. It hit hard because it was true. And meanwhile, the ripple effects continued. Rumors began to swirl that Whoopi Goldberg, long the matriarchal anchor of The View, was considering a quiet exit. She hadn't addressed the Meghan controversy publicly. In fact, she hadn't addressed much at all in recent weeks. She had skipped several tapings, citing personal reasons. But sources hinted that behind the scenes, the fallout had shaken her more than she let on. A veteran of live media, Goldberg had always prided herself on being unflinching. But this was different. The backlash wasn't just loud, it was nuanced. It wasn't calling her wrong, it was calling the whole ecosystem flawed. By the time a BC began vetting potential replacements in spin-off formats, it was clear they understood they couldn't just outlast the news cycle. They had to evolve. And quietly, almost ironically, they had Meghan to thank for that. She hadn't set out to dismantle anything. She just refused to participate in a format that no longer served the moment. She hadn't demanded control, she'd simply exercised it. And in doing so, she proved something profound. Walking away doesn't always signal weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest message you can send. Today, Meghan Markle's Unspoken is one of the most talked about interview series in digital media. And The View, it's still airing, but with a noticeably different tone. Fewer fireworks, more pauses, a little less shouting, and a little more listening. Maybe that's the real legacy of that moment. Not just a viral clip, not just a celebrity walk-off, but a quiet revolution in how we speak and how we listen in front of the world. Because when Meghan Markle stood up, the world leaned in, and they haven't looked away since.